Today, what we plan to do is briefly kind of give an overview of the retail industry as we see it both on a national level and what we see locally. And then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. So please feel free to go ahead and answer your questions, ask your questions now, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. We should have plenty of time. We're scheduled for about 30 minutes, but we can go more or less depending on how active we are in the question and answer session. So, but before we get going, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Infinity Signs. They've been kind enough to sponsor this section of our Outlook. So thank you for contribution on that. First off, or next, we'll go with introductions. We'll start with Bryan Vaughn. Bryan's the most recent member to join our team here at Colliers. He has over 20 years experience in the industry, most of it on the development side. He came over to us from a Hawkins company, and we're really lucky to have him join us. Next up is Kelly. Kelly's been at Colliers for a little over 6 years. Most of that time has been in the property management session. She made the leap to brokerage services a little over 2 years ago, and we're very lucky she made that. She brings a depth of experience on navigating leases, co-tenancies, and bringing in property management. Next, we have Mallisa. Mallisa has nearly 10 years experience in the industry. We've been lucky to have her at Colliers for over 5 years. Mallisa is one of the hardest workers I've seen. She actually really enjoys cold calling, so she's also a great asset. Then lastly, we have Mike. Mike is our senior member, which is tough to tell, I think mostly because he started when he was 10 or 12 years old, but he's been in the industry and at Colliers for over 20 years, and he's a great resource because he's seen a lot of things happen over the years here at Colliers. And then lastly, my name's Dave Cadwell. I'll be the host for today. And I do have to say, one of the things that I've been at Colliers this time, it's my second time I've been at Colliers. I've been here, I think, almost 4 years now, and I thoroughly enjoy it. One of the things I enjoy most is that our team really works well together as a team. We can tailor our needs to suit the client's needs. We can work together, we can work separately. You can get teams of 2 or 3 amongst us. And we're all really just here to support our fellow team members and our clients' needs. And I've really enjoyed it. It's really, really fun group to be a part of. And I'm thankful for that. So again, we're going to go through an overview of the retail industry, both nationally, a little bit what Steve hit on, and then locally, what we're seeing with our boots on the ground. But again, please feel free to ask some questions. We'll have time to get to those at the end of our overview. First, let's start with Kelly. Kelly, Steve seemed to hit on a lot of what we're hearing nationally about bankruptcies and store closings and all that good stuff. Can you talk a little bit about some of those national trends we're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So one of the overall trends we've seen in retail is just one of accelerated change. The e-commerce story is nothing new, but the pandemic and, retail shutdowns and everything that came with that really made that happen a lot faster. So brands or categories that were already struggling are now, declining more quickly. Steve referenced the retail bankruptcies. So last year was already, a record year, 9,500 store closures, 17 major retail bankruptcies. And this year, we're already at 30, and I'm with Steve, we'll certainly see more before the year is over. And again, with a record number of store closures expected. But on the flip side, we've seen that retailers that are able to adapt have been very successful in all categories of retail. So from food to users like Ulta, who quickly changed into an e-commerce format, started out a virtual reality makeup try-on, these types of things, and these tech attempts have really made some retailers stand out. So another factor we've seen this year has been a retailer's status as essential, whatever the government's definition of that is. So for example, grocery sales were up 13% in the first half of the year, and home and garden sales were up 7%. We've also seen really strong demand in in sporting goods and other types of retail that's been important as people couldn't do other things. And as Stieg also referenced, e-commerce is up drastically, but brick and mortar has remained really important for retailers. They're really coming into that omni-channel experience and providing, meeting the customer where they're at instead of only being available in one place. So those are some of the broader trends we've seen so far.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Hey, Bryan, we're noticing, and Stieg hit on also, the COVID is having an impact on where and how people are working, especially downtowns. How does that indirectly impact retailers moving forward, both currently and then moving forward?
Well, yeah, I think, Dave, I think that's the large thing that we're all finding is that everybody's adapting to some flexible schedule where it's whether they're working from home a few days a week or working from home the full time. And the national trends have shown that obviously the urban areas are seeing the greatest impacts in the retail sales drop. The areas in the suburban areas are actually picking up quite a bit. That's obviously directly correlated to people not coming into the downtown areas or the CBDs and staying in their area. But we have definitely seen that retailers, as they've adapted, have been able to perform better than others. There's certain categories that are just in trouble as a whole, bars, restaurants, obviously concert venues, things like that just are, there's no real substitute to be done to that. To Kelly's point, though, we're seeing grocery and food sales up, especially those that are around drive-throughs. So we would think that for the most part, the national trend is going to be that brick and mortar is going to try to figure out ways to complement or add those services that are either done through online or pickup or delivery. We'd expect the continued trend of use of different food service apps, delivery services. Those types of things will probably continue to propagate even more. Obviously, Boise with a downtown that functions a little bit as a downtown, but also as a neighborhood area. We're seeing, a benefit here, a positive aspect here in Idaho. We are seeing the net growth that Jim and Stieg and also Matt all alluded to as we continue to see people get away from the areas where they're in a more densely populated area, the markets that you live there because of the quality of life that a city would offer you. People were finding that, hey, Boise or other markets out west, particularly that have outdoor activities, and we're seeing a net immigration that's pretty staggering. And you can look at across multiple different areas where people didn't have second homes, other areas where they may recreate. Those places are seeing a population boom like they've never seen before. I think going forward, though, Idaho is in a positive spot to bring the market alone. As we continue to see this growth, we'll continue to see the growth in housing. Obviously, we're under historic times in supply, and we're seeing price increases. But most people that are coming here, this is a lesser or a cheaper quality of life than it was where they're coming from. So those trends will eventually force the need for more development as we continue to see the residency climb.
Hey, thanks. Kind of circling back a little bit to what Kelly was talking about, Mallisa, you hear nationally about all these vacancies and bankruptcies. How's that translate locally? What are we seeing? What are some of the numbers of vacancies?
Yeah, so when it comes to absorption, we've got a negative absorption in Ada County of around 13,000 square feet. Canyon County, we got a negative absorption around 29,000 square feet. But what's really interesting about that, Dave, is there was a 3.1% vacancy rate in Ada County Q1 of this year before COVID hit, and that's now at 3.7%, and 20% of that is big box retailers. And then in Canyon County, we're at 7.3% in Q1, and now we're currently at 7.5%, and 39% of that is big box retailers. So it's really not impacting that vacancy rate that much, besides a lot of the big box retailers that, to Kelly's point earlier, maybe were already struggling pre-pandemic. And then to touch a little bit on what Jim was saying before, the entire Idaho market when it comes to unemployment rates really is phenomenal. We're about 4% unemployment rate. And due to the migration that we have here, people moving here, we've actually seen an increase in the average asking rate for existing retail where last year we're at $14.50 per square foot for existing, and currently we're at $17.50 per square foot for existing retail. So that's a 3% jump in average asking price in the past year, which is really phenomenal.
Great, thanks. And I'll give Mike the toughest question, since you've lived through a few cycles already here in the Boise market. What's your crystal ball telling you? What do you see the Valley doing moving forward?
Is that directed at me, Dave?
Yes, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah. We are very lucky and fortunate to live in Idaho. I think we've still got some struggle ahead of us overall, but Idaho has been resilient, and a lot of the retailers and restaurant tenants around town have adapted to the new normal and have created successful strategies moving forward through this pandemic. It's been nice to see how the restaurant groups adapted to takeout and delivery so quickly when their dining rooms were shut down, and other retailers are doing the similar paths, adapting to what the new normal is. And so I think hopefully we can get control of this recent case spike and then get back to normal. And I think just the sheer numbers of in-migration will help boost Idaho back to some level of normal.
Great, thanks. Now let's get on to the question and answer session. So again, if you have any questions, please do type those in there. There should be a question and answer box, and we'll try to get to most, if not all, the questions that are asked. Let's see, the first one, let's have Kelly take. Kelly, how has COVID affected retail rental rates?
Yeah, so Mallisa touched on this just a little, and I just saw another question come in on this for the specific numbers. So in Ada County, we've seen, and this is an average rate across all markets, we've seen an increase of 62 cents to $18.12 per square foot. In Canyon County, average asking rate is $16.14, up about 90 cents. And so we haven't yet seen any negative effects on the asking rate, and some of that is due to the low vacancy, right? It's still a landlord's market when it comes to rental rates. That being said, I think we're all very optimistic about the future of Idaho and the Treasure Valley market. The pandemic's not over, as much as we'd all like it to be. And, it still remains to be seen what happens, during the winter as stimulus funding runs out, and, the uncertainty of new stimulus, that could really affect retailers' long-term prospects.
Great, thank you. We'll get this next one to Bryan. Bryan, the future of smaller neighborhood retail multi-development buildings, any insight into tenant mixes?
Certainly. I mean, obviously, this pandemic's proven that there are certain services that are just needed to be in place. I would say that for our market, looking and blowing it down, we really haven't seen many major developments, especially in the regional or the power center nature. Obviously, we've got one project going out currently, Orchard Park, formerly Linder Village. But that, again, is almost truly just kind of serving the neighborhood. And see the growth of West Meridian. That's really a lagging indicator of needed services out there. Obviously, you had Fred Meyer out there beforehand, but you'll continue to see the presence of that. And ultimately, to Kelly's point about the vacancy, that's a supply issue. Right now, we're at a really low supply of retail, propping rents and also giving landlords a little bit of ability to be able to continue to drive rents up. I do see in the future that there'll be need for more neighborhood services as we obviously put those rooftops in, specifically the northwest area of the valley, Nampa, Kuna. You're going to see a need for some development.
That's one of the interesting things I've noticed. You hear nationally about how much vacancy there is in closures, and then when we all talk internally, there's not enough supply, which is just counterintuitive to what we're seeing nationally, but I think speaks to how strong our market is. Let's have the next one. I'll direct to you, Mike. What changes have you observed in the local market in terms of cap rate and transaction volume for retail? And maybe speak to the impacts of COVID on that.
So far, we have seen no movement in cap rates in retail investment product. Some of the product types like industrial actually saw compressions and their cap rates further reduced following the interest rates being reduced as well. I would say, though, that the transaction volume is off more than 50% this year, being 2020, than what we saw last year. But so far, no movement in cap rates.
Interesting. Let's go. How about Mallisa? What changes? No, I meant how are restaurants adapting to COVID? And I guess more generally, I read a lot of articles saying somewhere between 30 and 50% of restaurants aren't going to survive the year. Can you speak to that and maybe tie into how they're adapting to survive?
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, right? The key word that we've kind of touched on a lot of this is adapting. The restaurants that adapt are going to be the ones that stay in business or potentially thrive. During the shutdown, I actually spoke to quite a few restaurant owners that were doing higher sales during the shutdown than they were beforehand. So it's all a matter of how they can adapt, how they can thrive by adapting. So what I'm seeing a lot of restaurant owners do is a lot of them are pushing for drive-through locations. It seems like everybody wants a drive-through, and they're also integrating and really basically speeding up the integration of internet and the apps and stuff like that to make it more convenient for their customer base to go there. One that particularly really like stands out to me is Chipotle, where you can order on the app and then you just go there and pick up your food without having to stand in line. So the more those restaurants adapt, the more they'll thrive in this new economy, in this new world we're in. It will be interesting, however, to see how the cold weather impacts restaurants with social distancing. Restaurants that have been really utilizing patios and outdoor seating may really struggle as we head into winter here on how they're going to accommodate social distancing.
Yeah, especially since we moved back to stage 3 statewide yesterday. Will be probably with us for a while, I would think. How about Kelly? What do you see the holiday season being like for retailers?
Yeah, so like everything else this year, we're expecting a little bit of a different holiday season. There are predictions ranging from like 0 to 1% growth up to 3.5% growth in holiday sales this year. Although the more optimistic forecast, assumes stimulus and more money in people's pockets from the federal government. But still, even, I would say in the situation we're in, 0% change from last year would be a major win for retailers. So along with, fairly strong expected sales, we're still expecting to see it look a little different. Retailers are planning multiple discount events instead of focusing on Black Friday, to accommodate not just difficulties with their supply chain and inventory, but also how you can't have Black Friday in a pandemic with throngs of people, fighting over the newest toy. So for example, Walmart, they're planning to do 3 different discount events, and each one will start online and then continue in the stores to kind of spread that out. And that kind of reflects what consumers are planning to do, where most of them plan to start shopping by Halloween or have already started today, to spread out their spending over the season.
Great. Last question I have on here. So again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in here, type them up, and we'll get them answered. This could be our last question. Mike, can you speak to rents on new construction, what they need to be to get a project off versus how that relates to existing market rents, and what, if any, disparity there is between those two?
Yeah, Dave, that's a great question, comment. Unfortunately, construction costs are so expensive, it is hard to bring on new product, which I think is also helping keep our supply in check. the average rates in the markets for retail are in the mid-teens, and to bring on new construction these days, you've got to be in the high 20s to sometimes low 30s to make a project make sense. And so you can get some economies of scale and get it pushed down to the mid 20s on large projects, but it is very hard to bring on new construction without leases already signed, just based on the risk and the where the rents need to be to justify.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's and we've talked a bunch about it internally, but you read all this stuff nationally again, and locally we have a pretty good market, pretty low vacancies, and really optimistic moving forward. So with that, we'll wrap up this pod session. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us. And again, we really do all work well together. So if there's something we can talk to you about, you want to talk to a couple of us, all of us, one of us, please do let us know. Happy to discuss our market further with you. Thank you for joining us in this COVID year. Hopefully next year we'll be back live at the Grove, and at this point be spilling into the happy hour session. That'll have to be next year. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope to work with you somehow soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Be safe.
Thanks, everyone.